wavelength.com. Everybody turn up. Jeff. I'm Alex Kingman.
I'm Jeff Doss. Let's do this, guys. Before we get going and we introduce all of our special guests today, we want you guys to know we are sponsored by the Virtual Fight Tour, and we are excited to everyone this weekend to check out the 1-year anniversary VFT 10. It's going to be awesome. Some great fights, some amazing stuff. Go to myeventx.com to get your ticket now. And I'm pretty sure they have all their in-person seats sold out. So pretty excited for that event. Too. It's going to be a great one. It's going to be a great one. We're excited to be a part of what they're doing. So, all right, guys. So we are excited. We have, let's see, we'll just go this way. All right. We have Lauren Carney. We have Elise Gorell, and we have Casey Marks Nash. Thank you so much for joining us. This is going to be a fun one.
Action-packed. Elise is making her first appearance on Inside Scoop. Lauren and Casey have been here once before. But everybody, it won't be the only time. It won't be the last time. Right, ladies?
Sure.
We'll find out after this.
You know what?
You might think otherwise when this is over.
That's a great point right there. Well, let's keep this thing rolling. We got a lot of topics that we want to get into. We were just chatting a little bit about it. Like, so we guys, for insiders, for you guys who don't know, like sometimes the best show is before the show. Like, we just get into everything to the point where Jeff and I are like, stop, this is gold. This is gold. Let's just go live. But we were talking a little bit, at least I was just asking you a little bit about like what your competition is looking like. Of the three of you, you're the most recent competitor, I would assume. Well, Casey, you're still competing, right? If you get a chance to, you do it. Am I wrong? What's going on?
Well, if I get the chance, I guess I'll go. I mean, it's hard. I will say, I don't know if we touched about this last time, but it is really hard being there and not competing. Like if I'm not going to compete, I'm at the point like I'd rather just not go. But yeah.
So
we'll see.
Just calls you.
A little bit. I don't know. I guess it's hard to sit on the sidelines. But.
Does it bother you watching the field of competition, feeling like I would whoop them? Does that bother you?
I don't know if it's going, I would whoop them, but it's going, I wonder where I would fall. And I think there's that little bit of competitive where you go, you kind of just want to know a little bit.
It's like you hate wondering. Like, let me just find out.
Yeah.
Oh, I get it.
You have lots to give to the sport. So
thanks.
Yeah.
All right, Elise, answer that question. We kind of.
Yeah.
What was the question? Sorry.
Well, like, what's your competition looking like? Like, we were chatting a little bit about that. I know that you were saying, like, all right, once this opens up, I want to get back. I want to win the Irish Open again because you did win the Irish Open. Not like.
I didn't say I wanted to win. Obviously, I think everyone wants to win. I said I wanted to go.
Yeah.
I just like going, and I think, we have a fantastic pool of women fighters over there. And I think it's just amazing. I get so many good fights. We have amazing women competitors here, but I love it that they all go into one place during one time of the year.
Yeah. And then the pool is really fantastic. It's on that topic. It really is probably the last time that we've really seen deep, just pure women teams, 3 women team fighting, and there's just lots of teams and a lot of events that we'll go to, whether it be Canada or the States. There's just not enough of them that are doing that. So I agree with your sentiment about the pool of women that are there and the competition level.
Yeah, it's definitely exciting. It's definitely exciting. All right, so again, we got all kinds of stuff we're going to get into. As we talked about earlier today, we're going to really talk a lot about coaching and teaching and what martial arts, what we need, what sports needs, all kinds of stuff. But Elise, explain what you are doing currently and what you are going to school for and all that. So just to explain your background, what you're doing currently.
Currently for professional wise, I'm in school, going for my PhD, studying for applied health sciences, but that also I've been studying sports psychology since 2015. So I work with athletes in their mental game, My undergraduate background is sport management, so I have all that going on too. And then now I'm working on my thesis, which is looking at social media and how it affects athletes and coaches. But also I've learned a lot of like sports sociology, sport history, like there's all that good stuff too, but it all kind of is incorporated into one. And that's what we're kind of looking at today.
Love it. Awesome.
This is pretty dope.
What?
Yeah.
Well, there was so much that like you just had to like unpack there for what that is, and all of it is so interesting. I really want to hear more about it, which we're going to get into today. I'm assuming, yes.
I think so.
Yeah, as much as we can.
Talk about how to make candy.
I can eat it. I'm good at that.
Oh my God.
All right. So let's get into our first thing about just coaches and sport karate. Let's see, the first kind of question I'd say would be how are people picking coaches, right? How are athletes picking coaches? And I guess really we have to kind of go into context, what level we're talking about.
Yeah.
Are we talking about junior black belts? We're talking about underbelts. We're talking about adults. Let's just kind of get into it and what you want to talk about first.
Well, I think Lauren and I have had the conversation quite extensively over the last few years about the differences between what people view as an instructor and a coach. And a lot of people use the word coach sometimes maybe in not the right context. And in my opinion, I think there's a difference. I know Lauren is a lot more versed in her views on the separation. When you look at whether or not you have a coach or an instructor or a trainer, they have much different roles. And a lot of times I feel in sports, we try to lump all those tasks onto one person. And sometimes that's where the athlete doesn't necessarily benefit because they're not getting the best of each of those. They're getting somebody that's trying to wear all the hats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, many of us do that as school owners anyway. So then you add that into our sport and you're adding a whole nother hat into it as well, or sometimes three.
Yeah. Well, Lauren, what would you say is the divide between the two, or three, if you're going to put three in there?
So like you said, we've already had this, you and I have had this conversation a lot. I personally think that there's your instructor, which is your typical everyday. In my opinion, they're probably the most important person because they should be the person that are really stressing the foundation of what it is that our sport is built on. So if you aren't going to somebody regularly, that's an instructor of some kind, whether it's class or even if it's training with someone online who can at least address those foundational things, that kind of creates a little bit of a problem, which goes into something that I think one of Elise's podcasts really sort of emphasized some. And then you have your trainer, and your trainer is really designed to maybe be, in my opinion, your choreographer. They're the people that maybe are the ones that are creating your forms. They're the ones that are helping you to kind of pick music or hey, let's learn these forms because you're running this form right now, but this is the next step because you're going to need something down the line. And then you have your coach who's really kind of making the ultimate decisions of what you need to be doing right now, what you need to be working on. Maybe they're at least knowledgeable about like, hey, I see an imbalance in muscles because there's not enough of that in our sport. And I one of the things I absolutely loved about, actually, I loved the entire series of podcasts that Elise has put out there. Casey was laughing at me because I listened to the whole thing last weekend. I was like one after the next. He's like, dude, you got to check out episode 6. I was like, you got to check out episode 9. This is great.
That's awesome.
And I think it's a really interesting thing because there's so many people that are popping up that are doing exercise physiology or kinesiology degrees, but they're not applying any of it in our sport.
Bingo.
So we see a lot of this stuff where it's like, wow, we see these kids that are doing stuff that's phenomenal, and you're like, but you can't do a push-up without correctly. Like, how is it that you're good at bow?
Yeah.
And you know, like I don't know. I go back to when I was a little kid and I was working with Casey at like 12. And by the time I was 14, I had traps that felt like they were Goldbergs. They were just huge. And now I look at these kids and I'm like,
hey, don't make fun of wrestling, okay?
No,
Casey knows what I'm talking about. It's like the muscular development of like, hey, that coach person should be looking at you from a much broader, like a 30,000 feet up and going, I'm not the guy to do this. And I mean, I'll just use myself. Michaela and I, when we would train together, and I'm like, Michaela, I'm not the guy to create a form for you, but I can train the garbage out of this form so that it is so pristine and polished and whatever. And we've thought so many different scenarios through. There's not really anything left for us to do except you need to go back to this person to find out, okay, well, what's next? Because I don't know what it is. Go talk to Rudy. Go talk to Stephen Rennie. Go talk to these people because I ain't it. But go talk to them, because then come back and I'll talk to them and we'll figure out where do we sit in this space.
Yeah, and I think that goes to your point of, are you picking the right coach? And I think then you have to know, again, where you're dividing those responsibilities. I think we kind of agreed earlier in one of our other conversations that the coach has a major role when it comes to strategy.
Yeah.
As far as how you're going to attack the event. And based on what you're just saying, that the trainer is going to get you in shape and the instructor is going to teach you and they all overlap. And I think that personally, I'm finding some of the kids that we're working with are missing one or more than one of those elements on a regular basis.
Well, yeah, that's why you look at like football, they have a strength and conditioning coach.
Exactly.
They have a trainer, they have an offensive coach, they have they have all those different things that work on different things. And so
and they're all experts in their field.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's the step that we are behind on other sports. And maybe that's a part that we haven't even looked at. We thought it's something else, but maybe this is another point that could be, something that's kept us behind.
Yeah. Well, I think if you're going to apply it to other sports like you just did with football, I think there are a lot of other athletics that are already doing this.
Yep.
But I think that for martial arts, it's always been like the role of sensei is kind of everything. They're going to teach your basics. Through the course of teaching your basics, they're going to get you in the specific shape that you need to perform them. And then they're going to help you apply the strategy, which is the application behind what you learned. So it's always been that everything.
Right.
And
the more as that sensei or coach or whatever, really sensei, the more you learn, the better, because some don't, they just stay here. Right. Unfortunately, but some do go outside and learn more things, and that's great. But you're still, I'm just going to tell you, for me, if I'm on the floor and I'm running my school and I have a packed class, my head as an instructor is different than anyone else because I'm the owner of everything else. I see things differently of what's going on just in and I'm saying, oh, there's a parent looking upset over here, or there's this or that. Oh, wait, this kid's not doing this. Let me make sure you think of different things differently. And when everything's on top of you, like there's too much pressure and you're holding back as really when you should just be focused on instructing, right?
Yes, 100%.
The same thing happens in this case, right? We want to do it all and we're trying to cram it all into a 1 hour private lesson.
Okay, so this is great. So like even just to unpack what we just talked about now is a lot.
Yeah.
So
good job, Alex.
We
need to slow it down a little bit.
No. I actually don't want to do that. I actually want to do it a little differently. So I need some real examples. So like, how do we, like, Lauren, get raw, right?
Yeah.
So like when you're saying like, all right, how you're picking your coach and we're giving vague examples, like, can you just like give me a real example? You don't have to name names, and I'm not asking for that, but like what somebody is doing, maybe where you've witnessed it and they're blowing it, or what's a great example where somebody is doing this, and maybe you can't even name a name there because it's a positive one, right? Help me with that. Give me a real example of where somebody is doing this the right way or wrong way, or where we're going wrong.
Well, I think this it's convoluted because it jumps kind of to a next point of like, but how are you picking your coaches is largely predicated on, well, that should be based on what your goals are. Mm-hmm. And if you haven't clearly defined what your goals are, then me picking, 10 years ago, you go, well, you coming to me to coach you, I may not be the right coach because maybe my skill set or my ability to understand you as an athlete, you go, I'm not the guy to get you there because what you want to do isn't something I'm good at doing. And I think we saw this when we were much younger, and we see it a little bit now where you go, just because you're winning doesn't mean you're good at coaching. And there's probably one of my favorite points, and I don't remember what episode it was, but it was, I think it was episode 6, right?
She says 4.
If it's coaching,
Okay.
4. Sorry.
Yeah, and I loved it because it was the great one. Wayne Gretzky is one of the greatest, hockey players of all time, but he's also known as the worst coach of all time. And you go,
Yeah.
is that happening now? And you go, I don't know. I don't know if it is, but you go, I think it comes down to, well, that would be kind of predicated on what are you looking to do? What are you trying to do? And you're like, I just want to win. You go, but how? How do you want to win?
But that goes the other way too, because I think some great coaches are overlooked because they maybe weren't at the height of that talent pool, yet they're able to convey the message in the right way.
Right.
And they fit that athlete, right?
Correct.
And I agree with you when you say that it depends on what your goals are, because you need someone that can understand your goals, is like-minded to help you on that path, which goes back to coaching, helping strategy, right? I think you talked about that in yours too with Maureen, about having the right fit with learning style, right?
Mm-hmm. You have to have a successful and effective relationship with your coach. That is the ideal state that you want to be in.
Yeah.
Damn,
Relationship with coaches is very important.
An Elise podcast junkie now too. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you gotta go.
Yeah, just follow me.
I'm gonna throw it in the link somewhere if I can figure out how to do it from the little podcast because the whole thing.
It's great.
And
Thank you.
Okay, if we're gonna jump to that, like I was listening to it and texting Lauren as I'm doing it, going, oh my God, 10 minutes in, bang, oh holy crap, this is exactly right. Like there were so many points I'm like, pray, like it was just perfect.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about that relationship with the coach, I think a lot of it also boils down to the type of learner that you're dealing with, because so as instructors, we learn a lot. And I know same, you can chime in whenever you want. If you boil it down, you have like 3 types of learners, right? Like visual learners, people that learn by what they hear, and then people that learn by what they do, like actually physically doing it. I know there are some people that break it down into like 7 categories, 8 categories. They overlap stuff. They're like, oh, you're a social learner, you're a group learner. Like
there's a lot of frameworks.
There's a lot of different ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
But those are your basic 3, right?
Yeah.
Kinesthetic, audio, and
tactile. You can put it into.
Yeah. I think that's the one that's missing.
Yeah.
Is tactile. And I think we were talking about the other day, I think with the pandemic, I think we're going to see even more, and this is not just karate, this is across the board, of young kids that are missing out on a lot of that tactile learning, because it's being removed because of concern. But then you go to sport and you go like, how do I teach someone athletics without a tactile component?
Yeah.
Right. And again, this isn't a linear conversation, just going to jump, but that tactile component in martial arts is the self-defense aspect of what your sensei teaches you, which the majority of sports competitors don't participate in.
Yep.
Because self-defense doesn't seem to translate into what we do as a performer. But if you step back and you go, you need to physically put your hands on a person to understand cause and effect, which will help you create timing, pace, and believability in a creative form.
And everything.
Because we're missing that tactile element of, if I grab you here, you're going to spin that way, then I can pin you this way and roll you back. Like there's an element that's definitely, in my opinion, missing.
Yeah. What's sad is that there's so many competitors that stopped going to class and just did private lessons or just did their tournament class.
Yeah.
And especially when it comes to forms. Because that's what they enjoyed. And there's a good and bad element about it. That's what I love about martial arts. There's always something there's something for everyone in martial arts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's great about that. But you still have to stick with, like we talked about when you were on the last time, Casey, like be a martial artist. And, and so there's a combo. We're different than any other sport because there is a separation between what we do. Like you have your martial arts that you do for just the train and the lifestyle part of it. And then you have the sport that's separate. If you go and play baseball, you're doing it and you're playing games as, like you're joining a sport to compete. You don't join martial arts. Most people don't join martial arts to compete. There's a few that do that, but no one really does that.
Yeah, nobody does
you
that.
find that out later on, that it's something separate and you need to train for it separate. Like the worst is when people just do regular karate class and then want to go to a tournament and don't understand that it's not the same. And I'm sorry, you're not going to be, until they see that the people that are doing the second and third levels of that are doing better.
So
So
that's why you need a good coach.
exactly, you
Tell you
exactly.
that.
Exactly. You have to.
Which I think opens up the door for Jacob Cleary's thing of like, what's the
Yeah.
most important coaching attribute? And you go, well, do you have someone who's going to be just brutally honest with you?
Right.
Like,
that
learning.
person.
Really
Oh, you hit it. That might not be the best learning style
Yeah.
for them.
Like
You
like
just-
things we were trying to like you have you guys are talking about you have fighters that respond to being yelled at, right? I have kids that respond to being yelled at, but then I have other kids that, you have to kick their parent out.
Yeah.
Because parent is harping on fix, but the kid will respond when I give them that single praise one time.
Mm-hmm.
You go, what you did right there, instant correction. That was what I want. And they go, I did it. And you go, yeah. And I got them. And all of a sudden that mentality of their approach to that class is completely changed. Now, other kids, that doesn't work, right? Other kids you need smarten up, right?
Mhm.
But you have to know what you're dealing with.
Well, that's why as
learning style.
instructors, tell me if I got this wrong, but as instructors or coaches or choreographers, we really have to be like chameleons. We got to wear a lot of different hats.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot of different people that we may be working with. We don't have one person that we coach.
No.
We don't have one person that we train.
No.
You got a class with 20 or 30 or more people, and no two people are ever the same.
No, but that's why your best instructors or senseis overlap all those training tools,
Mm-hmm.
right? You overlap what you see with what you hear with what you do. So if I can overlap all of those learning styles, that's when we learn the most, is when you're engaged and you're immersed, it would be the right way to say it. Like you're immersed in the experience.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
You're not listening to just a lecture or performing the same technique again and again.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right?
That's about as fun as a stick in the eye.
Well, like
Stick in the eye.
Yeah, that's
I would
not fun.
agree.
That's why I said that would be about as fun as a stick in the eye.
they need to
It
do
depends because I love repetition.
Yeah.
Like I will sit and do it 1,000 times. She knows, like again. But not everybody's that way. Evidently, Alex is not that way.
No,
We would have to approach Alex differently.
I get bored
We're
quick.
Yeah. So
really?
we're gonna play games.
Not
with him.
have guessed
way.
that.
We're gonna let him use
Yo,
his-
Lauren, I remember you telling me one time, like, if you're really good at karate, you got a little bit of ADD in you.
You
I
have
got
to.
a lot.
You have to
You got-
ADD.
I got a
Oh,
lot.
no. So I think this goes into like a bigger scope of things, right? Where it's like, well,
So-
because I've done it, and I know some of the kids that I train have done it, where you're like, hey, are you trying to manage too many things at the same time? Which
Yeah.
part of my job, if I'm a good coach, is I understand that you want to do this, but we can't get there yet. We got to do this first. That was, I think, another point that came up with Maureen, is that it was like, hey, there's a succession that has to happen,
Yeah.
and
Big
too
time.
many people. And I've had this conversation with Marcel till wee hours in the morning, where you're like, I want to do this because that guy's doing it, and you go, but that's not what you need to be doing. You need to be doing this, and they're like, but this is what's going to help me win. And you go, is it? Like Raymond's a great defensive spinning, backing, kicking guy, and you go, I'm sorry, but you can't jump. This is probably not the move for you.
Right.
And you're like, but he looks cool. And you go,
Yeah.
still probably not the move for you. Like, okay. Or I mean, we've been in plenty of places together where you hear someone tell you to spin, and you're like,
No.
Yeah.
That you got to know your person, though.
Yeah.
And that's kind of goes back to what you were talking about before. So,
but are you listening to the coach? Or do you assume because the coach is now refuting what you're saying, well, they don't know what they're talking about either?
Let's move on to someone else.
I don't
does,
think
does
that,
is that coach giving you great advice? Because do they know that person right there? Where
Maybe.
like exactly what you just mentioned, Lauren, like spinning back kick would be ideal in that scenario.
If your
Not for
player
that
can
person.
do it.
I don't
Not-
think that
yeah,
kids
if
are
you're
being given opportunities to explore their movement, to figure out what they're good at. They
Right.
see the top fighter and they're like, so like if we're using Ray, oh, he's really good at spinning, but kids, especially like they want to get to point A as fast as they can at this point. But if they're not familiar with their capabilities and what they can do, then obviously they're going to think that they can do it until, they try it or
It becomes a negative
it
experience.
becomes a negative
Right.
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they need more opportunities to explore their movement instead of being like, sometimes curriculum is not great in that in that way because it kind of puts people in a box and doesn't let you explore what you can do.
Right.
And that's what we need. We need people like, you know, it might look stupid, but maybe you need to try it and see if it's effective or not.
Right.
That I think that circles back to the topic you guys brought up the other day with the generational gap with technology.
Yeah.
Because technology if we step away from martial arts and you go to sports in general, across all platforms, the coaches that I'm meeting and talking to are having the same issue with their kids. They're behind in development with a lot of the environmental elements of movement because they've got the electronics so early. And I don't want to say electronics are bad. I think technology is phenomenal, and the next generations are just going to be smarter and smarter and smarter. But there's, again, a lot of the tactile that's missing to form experiences to pull on to apply to athletics.
Let's get into just a couple questions that are there before we get going. So Jim Fish just asked, what do you look for in a trainer? My daughter has a trainer that focuses on core strength and conditioning, agility, but he has no martial arts background. Do you think the trainer needs a martial arts background?
No, I actually think that's pretty good.
It's like no.
It would be nice if they would listen and try and cooperate with you to understand what the sport is. Like, that's very important.
Right.
Like, you can't look at Cobra Kai and think you know the sport. And at that point, if it's like an alternative sport or, you know, not one of the big four, not a lot of people know about it. So you need to cooperate with your trainer and have that communication with them. It's working with them, and they need to be open to that.
Correct. Yeah. Whenever I got hurt or injured, my physical therapist, his son grew up doing martial arts with me. So he knew exactly what I needed to do, where my strengths were, where I needed, you know, and so it made it to where I was always 3 weeks faster at getting, you know, recovered than what I thought. That wasn't always my plan, because me, I like going to physical therapy because I get someone to actually coach me and train me and stuff. So I don't really always have that as someone who is a coach and a trainer, and, you know, it's always tough, you know, so having someone to coach you is important. And I'm sure we'll get in that too, because we as adults or as head coaches and stuff, we think, all right, well, my time of doing that's done. And, you know, no, you still need a coach as well as an adult, not just as a kid or a trainer, you know.
Well, I think this brings up an interesting point, because I'm reading Jim's comments on the side, and I go, as someone who has a background in exercise science, right? And it's like, okay, well, I studied the body for 4 years, and what we do is predominantly linear in motion. It's always moving in pretty much the same planes. We tend to get overuse injuries. So to have someone who's not from our background sometimes can really help you, because you're like, hey, did you know that your groin muscles, which is really like your abductors, your adductors, aren't firing because you don't ever use them, because you're always going straight forward or straight back. And you would need somebody that has a movement. I love the way that Maureen put it, is like a background in movement to really be able to dissect that in a person. But then that goes back to this idea of, well, is there a standard, whether it's a trainer or a coach or whatever, to be able to say, well, how do I know that the person I'm going to knows what they're talking about other than their own resume of success? Right. In our sport, I don't know. Who else have they trained? And you go, well, they've trained this person and this person. You go, well, then they must know what they're talking about. You go, but this goes back to your SMART goals of, but what are you trying to do? Are you just trying to win, or are you trying to become this all-encompassing person/athlete that happens to win, but also doesn't get injured every 5 seconds doing it? Yeah. Which there's plenty of those on the circuit, because they just, as my dear friend Vinny likes to say, they just yeet it. And they're like, yeet? And you're like, what? They're like, yeah, I hope I don't die. And you're like,
what? Wait, what is that?
Like, just go, like, just throw it.
You just chuck it. You're like, all right, here we go.
Yeah.
And you're like,
but I think that goes back to, does the trainer need to know martial arts? No, they need to know movement. And if you can get someone, your trainer, to get you in shape so that now your instructor can focus on proper mechanics, proper positioning of the elbow, proper body alignment, when to snap your hips now that you're strong enough to do it. you've now saved yourself a whole bunch of time on the other side of the ball going, I'm not now wasting, I don't know, my private lesson time doing what I need, push-ups, sit-ups, squats, right? Like I'm now doing what I need to do. It's a different mentality, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
So this opens itself to a conversation that we used to have a long time ago of, are you training with too many people?
Yeah.
And you go, well, in the martial arts world, now you go, well, but I'm working with this person for this, and I'm working with this person for that, and I'm working with this person for this. And you're like, you're working with 8 people? Why?
Well, okay, so I 100% get that point. But I think sometimes it's not necessarily how many people you're working with. It's whether or not the people you're working with are aware that you're working with the other people.
Yeah.
And are those coaches on the same wavelength?
Can they work together?
Yeah.
Well,
Because go ahead.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point you're bringing up, because like it's good to build a team, like as an athlete, like athlete orientation here, it's good to build a team around your success, right? Your goals. So who can I get to help me towards that goal? And you see this with, like, you know, if you want to go to track and field with the heptathlon, which I always nerd out on, they have like 5 coaches. And they
Wait, what sport did you just
it's
say?
not
She nerds out.
What is that sport that you just said?
heptathlon.
What is
It's
that?
not in track. So that's a women's specific sport. That's 7 events, and it's like 200
I've
meter.
never heard of this.
Really?
Look it up. It's
Was it
great.
the Olympics?
Yeah.
It's a
yeah.
big deal. Speed walking's in the Olympics.
I
What's up?
feel like that was
Oh,
Decathlon is the men's.
Decathlon is the men's, and women.
Do you know what the decathlon is?
Yeah, I'm aware. Is it the same thing, or what is it?
It's similar. There's different events. Anyways, there's like, so the decathlon is like 10 events. Heptathlon is 7 events. I think they're trying to change it so women do decathlon in the next Olympics, which would be really cool.
Yep.
Because there's really no reason why they can't.
Right.
Anyways,
It's the mile hurdle.
they have like 7 coaches.
Well, he's gonna list it. See, he knows. Mike knows.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I'm helping you out. Thank you.
Micah's a track star. His
Mhm.
daughter's a track
Yeah.
star.
Track is so cool.
Anyway, you're saying they have multiple coaches.
They have multiple coaches, but they also have multiple events. And like, you can't expect your jumping coach to help you with your sprints.
Correct.
Really.
Yeah.
So, or, you know,
Sure.
you need to do shot put, totally different movement than what you need to do for high jump. So you need
But then-
more coaches if you like, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
if
That
you're
takes
on
a
that
lot
path.
on the athlete, though. The athlete has to be able to really compartmentalize, like,
Build
a
your
lot.
team. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, that actually goes really well with a very good example. Casey, I don't know if you remember this. This is like, okay, it's probably 20 years ago.
Probably not. I get hit in the head a lot.
Me
So
too.
there was this kid, and we were hanging out with the Doglishes. So we're at the Doglishes.
Okay. Yeah.
And there was this kid in Minnesota. His name was Alex Newt, right?
I remember that name.
Right. And as I was there, we went and hung out, like, oh, you're in town, let's hang out, yada, yada. And you're like, yeah, I have to go train with him and his batonist. And I'm like, his what? And you were saying, yeah, we're going to go train. I think you said it was like 10 hours straight or 12 hours straight. It was something ridiculous. And so I laughed because I thought you were joking, but you weren't. And this is what I remember you telling me that
He's
you were going to train him, and his like batonist, like his baton twirlist, was going to be there too, and you had to coach them how to coach him. And I remember thinking that was the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
Okay, so I have done that with several kids, and it goes back to the fact that coaches need to cooperate together. So if you've got somebody like a baton coach who is number one in what they do and moves it in a different way, well, now they need to know, like you just said, what our goals are. So I need this kid to be able to do X, Y, Z. And now they know, right? Like they know which direction, instead of going, well, there are 20 elements that we're going to do with baton, but he only needs to know these specific 4. Well, now we've had that conversation and the athlete gets the benefit of that, if that makes sense. Normally I don't do it with baton instructors, but normally like going in to do seminars and stuff, I always tell the people that I come in with that it's smart for them to separate their classes by ability level. And then at the end, give me an hour with your instructors, because this is only going to help your students if your instructors also have enough of a handle on it to be able to carry on with what they've covered.
Correct.
Right. And I always find that that's a big benefit, because it gives both sides, like my side and their side, credibility when you're both saying the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to jump backwards before I forget, because I will forget. When we talk about like multiple coaches working together, and I think there needs to be more dialogue between coaches. And I think it's a lot easier in other sports, because other sports don't have the same history that comes along with martial arts.
Right.
And a lot of times with a specific style, whether you're training in Goju, Shorin-ryu, Isshin-ryu, Taekwondo, the different genres of each one, because they're spinoffs, right? They have their own history that goes with the elements of what they teach. And I feel like that's why a lot of very traditional instructors blanket their athletes, and they say, no, they need to stay with me because we have a very specific goal. And I've encountered a lot of athletes over the years that have been shunned by their home school because they chose to train with other people.
Right.
And there was a time there where there were a lot of athletes. I don't know if Alex ran into this at all, but where like you kind of hid the fact that you were training with so-and-so from your sensei because you didn't want to get in trouble. Did you guys ever have that issue?
I mean, I've seen it many times. Yeah. I mean,
I've seen it. I've never had an issue like that. I've seen it, but those were for issues because like we don't like that guy. That guy's dead to us. That kind of thing.
That guy's dead to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He's dead. Don't ever speak his name. Yeah, but nothing ever like that.
Really? Like, yeah,
but I know what you're talking about. I know that it's happened with other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen it a lot. But, you know, and another thing is what we're talking about. I mean, let's look at in the NBL days when people are doing multiple divisions, right? And let's just say the North Cuts, you know, because people will always like, why do they have 10 instructors? Well, they're doing 15 divisions and they need someone. I'm sorry, the person that does Kempo is probably not going to teach them Korean as well and be very effective, you know? So there is that, you know, people thought they were crazy for doing that, but it was obviously beneficial for them to be successful at each one, and actually, to their credit, look like each style the way it was supposed to be done, you know, and they went and got correct people for those.
100%, because each style comes with its own philosophy.
Correct.
Right? Like it's almost like its own subject in school. They have different principles that they're applying through movement, even though they're all moving with a different goal, right?
Right.
And I think if more coaches would converse with each other and get on the same page with what they can do to help the athlete, I think there would be less hurt feelings, right? And the kid benefits.
Yeah,
right?
It is like you have to reflect, who am I doing this for? Is it for myself as an instructor, or is it because I want to see my athlete progress?
Yes.
Right.
And I've had kids where it changes my role, because now like with a specific student, I don't know if you guys remember Max. Max was, case in point, Max was training with Keith for a while. And for some reason they didn't want to share that information. So coming to the school, Max was running his form one way in class, trying to remember how to run it a totally separate way when he trained in his private lessons. So now and you start watching, like there's something wrong, like as a coach helping you, that there's definitely we've got a disconnect. Right. So come to find out, well, we've been working, we didn't want to hurt. I'm like, dude, I think that's phenomenal. Like if I had the chance, I would 100% work with him, and I have. And it was some of the best information I received. He actually helped me win a couple world titles with his help, which was much needed. But anyway, so it changes my role, because now it's going, okay, what'd you guys work on? Perfect. Now I can be the trainer that helps reinforce what the coach told you. So I almost switch roles. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So now I'm not the one in charge. I'm the one facilitating what you learned, because we have an open dialogue, as an open relationship, like you were saying, for you to be able to tell me where this is what he wants me to fix. This is why. This is the philosophy behind. I go, okay, I can figure out ways to help you do that. So then you can go back and now you can get more information, instead of what all coaches hate, broken record. Well, I've told you this 3 private lessons in a row. Why haven't you fixed it?
Right.
I hate that, by the way. So
Which I think sometimes plays into this idea of are the parents sitting in the lessons and actively listening so that when the parents are going through with coaches, they can reinforce that with the specific athlete since they're paying for it anyway, right? You're like, are you reinforcing what's being said? Or are you like, I don't know what they tell you? Or in some cases, are they negating it?
Right.
The negating part is the worst.
How do you really feel?
I don't know if you guys, I feel like I'm the only one talking.
No,
No, but you bring in great stuff.
Yeah, you bring up great stuff, Case.
We have a lot of, you could put all three of us working with the same athlete and we're going to see the progression in a slightly different way because each one of us brings a slightly different skill set. So Lauren may say it's more important for me to get their feet in the right position. And I may say it's more important to get their weight in the right position. And you may say it's more important to get their hips in the right position. All three need to happen.
Right.
But it's just a different approach to the order, right? Well, a lot of times a parent has a different order in mind for what they feel needs to happen. And then that creates a little bit of a problem for the coach's side because we're not all on the same page.
I think parents are learning at the same time
Yeah.
now.
Mm-hmm.
Parents don't understand and they're learning. So, I mean, it's hard. And as a parent, it's hard to kind of like, you know, relinquish control a little bit and let.
And they have different goals too sometimes, you know, as well. So, I mean, they may have a goal that they think, but they're not really telling you, you know, and then you and the kid have kind of talked through some goals, you know, and then, but you and the parent need to have that conversation. It needs to be a team effort.
Well,
and again, like I said, we're talking about context here as well. Like, are we talking about, you know, I mean, it's completely different of a new person just starting to learn sport karate and get into there. And, you know, when the parent is asking in their third tournament, well, are they going to be able to win with this one or this one? And I'm like, listen, I'm not even there yet. Like, let's focus on developing them to get used to this and how it even feels to compete. It takes a lot longer than 2 or 3 tournaments to be successful, you know? And that's not even my goal, really. If they're a yellow belt, orange belt, green belt, you know, and I think some schools have made it have a system of, all right, this is the form, the type of form you do, and you're going to win everything, and you're going to be the best yellow belt of all time, and that's great. But a lot of times they don't stick with the sport because they're just, you know, doing the same thing, and they're so focused on, well, I won everything at this point, you know.
So that comes back to the goal setting, right?
Yep. Big time.
So I want you guys to touch on that a little bit more because I feel like without that, what are we talking about? Right? So what are some great, what would you suggest as a great way to set your goals? What are some examples?
Make them smart.
That is true. You explain it.
No, go. You know, we all do it. Like,
Casey has a great point. Make them smart, which is specific, measurable. You can switch it. I like using adjustable, but it can also be achievable.
Yeah, attainable.
How do you spell smart?
Next.
Realistic or relevant
Yep.
and time bound, which is very important.
Yes, got it.
And then I like combining that with so outcome goals, performance goals, process goals. So process goals are the ones you need to focus on because they're your building blocks. And then your performance goals, you use those as measurement goals. So seeing if the process is working, and then your outcome goal is like the ultimate thing that you want to achieve. So for instance, if I wanted to go to the Irish Open, that is my outcome goal, right? And my performance goals, I would measure that based on tournaments that I had in the year or my training partners in class. And my process goals would be like, what am I doing to get there? How many times am I training? How am I training? And what am I training?
Yeah, short term to long term.
Mm-hmm. The process goals, though, are so important because they keep you task oriented.
Yeah.
Which I think in our sport right now, and I think it's on both sides, is we're so focused on the result
Yes.
that we don't care how we get there. We're like, I don't really care. I have no process goals. I don't need to go from A to B to C to D. I just want to get to Z because that's going to get me to the result that I want. And you go, but because you skipped all these steps, 4 years from now, somebody's going to blow past you because you never created this foundational thing that was solid. And now all of a sudden everyone's seeing it because you just grew 4 inches. And you're like, I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
Kids
Right.
do grow, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Well, some don't.
Hey, I'm there with you.
you grew.
That's
Small
good.
joke number 1.
Yeah. In this size since I was like 14. Maybe not. But yeah, I think that's huge. And I think if more coaches and parents and athletes would sit down and actually take the time to do that.
It's exhausting
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah.
It's not simple.
No.
No.
But especially like you were talking, like in a pandemic where a lot of those things have been taken away, you need to be able to adapt and readdress, okay, well, how can I put goals for you, right? Like,
What are some creative solutions that I can use to measure your progress?
because it needs to be measurable.
Yes.
Which I think lends itself to what Arlene said.
Yeah,
Of
right, that's what I was
are
just gonna get that.
developing a periodization plan because the circuit's now 4,000 months a year. And so you're like, there is no off season. So
Right.
are you peaking? Are you maintaining?
Right.
Are you building and then you're peaking and maintaining again? Or are you just going? And
Right.
I think that's why you see at one point there was a large increase in injuries because it was like, well, number one, you're doing linear motion. You're not doing any kind of strength and conditioning and you never stop training. So you didn't build any of these process goals to be able to go, hey, I have an imbalance in my hamstrings.
Yep.
And because
Well,
I have
that's a
such
lot of martial
terribly
artists, your
strong
hips.
quads, now all of a sudden, especially in females, because it is like injury, basically it's like at the top of the injury list for females. It's like if you do this sport, especially the extreme side of it, and you are not doing something for hip performance, hip flexion, hamstring development, it's a guarantee at some point you will probably blow out your knee.
Yeah.
Guaranteed, because you just have to come down wrong once and it will go. And then once you kind of you're like, yeah, nope, you're done. So it's a really, to me, I think that's an interesting point because I think it's so often overlooked, which then goes back to the whole, but does the coach realize, and are they conveying that to the athlete, the parent, the instructor, the trainer, the everything else? This is the why behind all these steps. So yes, you might lose for a little bit, and that's okay because the goal should not be the result. The goal should be the process.
Right.
Tough pill to swallow for some
It
people.
kind of all develops in because then it's like, well, do you want to win right now or do you want to win do you want people to remember you in 5 years or do you just want to win right now and no one's going to care?
Do you want to be the best 14-year-old in the world, or do you want to actually be a world champion? Right? Would that be a great way to put that? Because who the heck cares? Who the heck knows who the best 14-year-old in the world is? I've never known. You know why? Because it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but at the same time, you go like, is that measurable because of all the different ways you could look at it?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I think for kids, I shouldn't say kids, for anyone, the measurable part of those SMART goals is key.
And time bound.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you got to give yourself a deadline.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, let's not even
Got
just
to.
say kids,
Big
because
time.
really, in my mid-20s, I wasn't doing this.
No, but
So,
it.
Well, I mean, I can comfortably say about some of our Paul Mitchell athletes right now that it's like, okay, so what are you doing this for? And they're like, and you're like, so if you're having a hard time defining what you're doing this for and you're training people, that kind of creates a problem because then you don't really know, like what your process is.
Correct.
So you can't be creating it for somebody else. That seems conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you go back to the benefits of sport for people in general, and I know like our slogan is teaching life skills through martial arts. If I can teach you as an athlete how to set SMART goals and the way that it works, in theory, as an adult growing up through life, you can apply those same principles to your finances, right? To all different facets of your life to say, okay, now I know the formula. So take the formula and apply it, right? And you get more like that's, I think that's why like people talk about sports is great, but there's so much that sport can offer us
especially for those tactile movers.
Yeah.
And from
Aesthetic.
just from goal setting
Yeah.
and dealing with conflict, which again, you cannot continue to remove conflict from sport because that is a huge part of it. Like oh God, we're going to get on. Everyone is a winner is not helpful.
Right.
Oh.
I will stop there.
Yeah.
No, well, no, you don't need to, because that's Jeff and I have been saying that a lot. I mean, I ragged on the Diamonds about that. When you just talked about the last one that they had, and I'm like, there were so many grand champions that are any of these grand.
Right. There's no grand in
They're
it.
not very grand.
Yo, put that in the little thingy at the bottom.
No,
Yeah.
do your hands again.
We talk about it all the time. It's
We do
bad.
that. We say that a lot, right?
Yeah,
That-
what's
your
so grand about it
championship
when there's
is your-
30 of them?
Yeah.
No.
But again, it's not just martial arts. It's
No.
Like you're hearing it across all sports. Soccer, everybody's a winner. These kids know who won.
Right.
That team scored 5 times. We didn't. The kids
don't-
know,
Don't
Right.
spit in my face and call it rain.
right? Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that.
So you just
It's
gotta
the
get used
same,
to some of those
Casey,
crazy
it's the
things.
same.
You need a supreme grand champion. That's hilarious.
But it's
That's good, Tim.
and again, that made me think Taco Bell.
Me too. Me too. I was just
Squirrel.
Oh my god!
Oh man.
But again, if everyone wins, we remove the conflict and we remove the measurable goal. Right? Like
Then what are we
you're
doing
taking
here?
away a huge life skill from these kids because they have to learn that you don't get everything you want.
Yeah.
And when you don't, what do you do?
Right.
Right. And a lot of people, because they're not getting that in, youth t-ball or youth
Right.
sports, are growing up to be teenagers who go, well, why can't I have it?
Right.
Well, because we've told you all along that, everybody's a winner.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? In the workforce, that's not the truth. You put in a resume, the best person gets a job.
Sometimes that's not even true.
Sometimes that's not even true, right?
Like sometimes it's I happen to know the guy that you wanted to know, and you didn't know you needed to know them, and now I get the job, and I'm not qualified, and you are way qualified, and you don't.
Sorry. Yes.
Right. But again, it's a marker for a life skill and a chance as a parent to teach our kids something, which I think is the ultimate goal, is to make them better people.
Yes.
Right.
Right. And that's like competition is actually the best way for student retention because it gives this person.
So we're going to go on that now.
Well, no, it gives this person, student, a tangible example of is what I'm doing actually doing anything, right? Am I any good? That's why I actually believe that point fighting is great for everybody because I can tell, like, is this working or not, right? Did I get there or not, right? Because everybody wants to hit someone without getting hit. Did I actually do that, right? So that's why I believe that a competition will give them a tangible, real example, right? Is your martial arts, are you doing any good at this thing? And then you get to go back. You're like, yeah, I was okay, but man, did I get whooped? Okay, now we get to go back. Now we get to do this thing again.
I don't think the problem is competition. I love competition. It is so exciting. But the problem is when people are compared to people who are out of their level. So if you're just starting out, and this is for all sports, this isn't just for, we tend to compare ourselves to people who are similar to our skill set or skill ability. If we either use the ones that are so far out of reach as role models, or if you're compared to them, it actually decreases your motivation, so you don't want to do it anymore. So it's maybe not the winning, because losing, it's just in everything. If you're but if you're beaten down by 5 points, then yeah, that's really discouraging. And then that goes into how are you being coached, or what opportunities you're giving, because a lot of people don't get the same opportunities either. So that's usually if we're going back to that example, not keeping score, I think that's a way of them trying to take focus off of that, but that's not necessarily the problem. The problem is that, you know, the comparison and just like being so unmotivated and not wanting to do it anymore because you're having those bad negative experiences because you're just not there yet.
Yeah. But if I have a coach that comes at me like Alex just did and goes, hey, look, you got one under your belt. How great was that? And they spin it. So they spin that adversity in a positive way that now motivates me. That's a totally different scenario, right?
Big time. Critically thinking about, okay, spinning positive,
Yep.
but then critically thinking about how could you have improved? What could you have done better is a lot better to enhance motivation than being like, oh, I lost and that sucked.
But that opens the door to a conversation that is probably going to have a whole bunch of people in the analytics just dip out right now. So I'm sorry, and it's a disclaimer, and we're just going to say it, and whatever, it is what it is. Where you have a societal situation of parents that are like, not my kid. And having been a teacher at one point, it was mind-boggling to have been the kid that my mom walked into, and they always thought I was crazy. They're like, what? And I was like, my mom walked into parent-teacher conferences and was like, I don't want to hear the good stuff. I want to know what she's not doing. And then she'd come home and it was like, oh no, what'd they say? And it was like, right, like, and of course the big thing when I was a kid was she talks too much. She was like, tell me something I don't know. She's like, what is she not doing?
Yeah.
You know, like, I'm working on it, but whatever.
Right.
In today's world, having been a teacher, you would go to these kids and you go to the parents and you'd be like, hey, your kid's doing this. Like, oh no, not my kid.
Right.
Or in our sport presently, you have a lot of parents that are like, my kid lost because. So
Yep.
your kid lost
Always.
because of what? And you go, my kid lost because the judges don't know what they're doing. Which
Always.
I'm not going to lie to you, they have no idea. But neither did our parents, and our parents can watch. They're not black belts. My mom's not a black belt. My mom could sit back and go, their form's not good because, and they could maybe rattle off like something super generic, but they'd still be able to tell you, well, it wasn't good because it's something generic.
Right.
Go home and fix that. And there's so much of that now where you're like, well, it isn't something because, and it's not my fault. And you go, but, you know, and I think there's a big part of this that's an accountability thing where you go, okay, but that's where the adjusting goes to your SMART goals of when you didn't hit the measurable, did you adjust or did you make up some excuse as to why it didn't happen? And that's where your collaborative scheme of people comes in of, okay, was this the problem? Or are you trying to skew it so you don't feel bad about yourself? Which I think is the biggest thing that I found. We were talking about before we all started this. And what I found most compelling about some of Elise's podcasts was that whole mentality side of it where you go, we're not talking about that in our sport and we need to start talking about it. Because there is a psychological part to this that we're only just starting to tap into as a society, unspecific to sport, that has to start being discussed. Because we keep making excuses for why we're not. Myself included, I'm probably at the top of that list of like, well, I'm not because, and I have a reason why, and it's such a dumb reason. Right. But it's very much this is entirely on me. And when you come to that introspective point as an adult, it's one thing. As a kid, you got to have somebody guiding you because you don't think it's your fault ever. So if you have someone who's an adult reinforcing, it's not your fault, honey. You lost because they just don't like you, or whatever the story is today. You go, or it's you lost because you just didn't do your job of convincing the 3, 5, 7 people that are sitting in front of you that I'm better than the other 5, 6 people that I had to compete after me.
Right.
Or whatever.
Yeah,
you know, and especially in a subjective sport like we do, you go, I don't know.
It's always a but.
There's no standards, but it's pretty standard. They're looking for power, speed, intensity, and performance. If you can do those 4 things better than everybody else, then ta-da, you win.
Right.
Yes. But I think
I love Lauren, man.
I know, but I think a lot of it comes back to one of the, if we're gonna go old, like the whole, like it takes a village to raise a child, right? Like it takes that, and I think society has lost that village mentality.
I mean, if only one person can be a winner, and you don't want, and everyone else can go F themselves, then that's not a great mentality to go by. And a lot of people preach that. It's like, you know, you got to be a winner. Like no one else can like beat you and whatever. And then it's just you and everyone else can just deal with it. That's not a great way for a society to function.
It's not even fun.
That's a lot of individuals trying to compete against each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. I'm not saying
No,
you
no, no.
shouldn't be like trying to strive.
No. I get what you're saying, though.
I 100% get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because there's a sportsmanship aspect that gets lost in that mentality.
Right.
And the fact that like we're all, if we're, you want to bring everybody up. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
Do I want to win every division? Yes, but I don't want to win every division because everyone else that showed up was crappy.
Exactly.
That's not fun.
No.
Right? Right, Alex?
Yes.
Right? You don't want
Yes.
exactly. Then it makes it mean something. But I think with the village to raise a child goes back to the support team you have between your parents, your coaches, your instructors, your teachers, all telling you the same thing. And my uncle calls it the tiny voice, which is funny because the last time I was home, we were talking about different things with my own kids, and he goes, Casey, he goes, that's what's missing is that tiny voice. Nobody uses it anymore. And I said, oh, Kevin, I don't know what the heck you're talking about. And he goes, do you remember when you were a kid and you would make a mistake and you'd have that tiny voice reminding you? And I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, you were little and you would say something and your mom would say, please. And you would say, please, right? You would and they'd say, thank you. And you would say, thank you. You had that instant correction from parents, grandparents, teachers, right? They were that tiny voice correcting your behavior, right? I think that goes to that whole foundation that we create to push our kids as people in the right direction. And that's what I mean by we've lost that community vibe because there's not a lot of people jumping in to support. It's a lot of individuals, right? And maybe that's, I don't know if that goes back to technology and social media and the disconnect between people in general. But if we want to succeed and we want our next generation, I think we need to be a more cohesive team to help these kids forward. So as a parent, I want to know what's happening with my kids' coaches so I can repeat what they're saying, right? And I want the coaches to know what my mentality is with my kid. And I want to have that conversation of this is how my kid learns and this is where I'm having issues. And we have to be saying the same thing. And I know you guys with family stuff, like it's the same as a family dynamic. If I say it, I need to know that Trevor's going to back me up and say the same thing because you can't have your kids pitting both parents against each other.
Oh, because they will.
Yeah.
Exactly. But it's also happening in sport because my coach said I don't have to. And he said that a punch is supposed to be this way. And you're telling me I don't want to do it. Right? Mom said this and you said that. Well, I'm going to pick.
Deuces.
They're doing the same thing, right? So again, we all have to communicate, work together towards the same goals that are smart and are measurable and actually get us somewhere. And I just I'll get off my soapbox.
I think those are great points. And I actually had very good. A question earlier where it's like, do you think it strengthens your relationship with your athlete if you are more transparent? And I think it does.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
It goes back to what Maureen said at the end of your interview. The 4 statements she said.
I couldn't repeat all of them, but it's like, I need help.
I don't understand.
I wrote them down.
I don't understand. Did you write them down?
I did write them down. Why? Because I have a mentor crush on this lady.
They're ready for ESPN, guys.
I was wrong.
Amazing. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't know, and I need help.
But I think what your tiny voice concept, Casey, I think generationally was something that I don't know if it was all of our parents, but like I can remember losing at a tournament and kind of starting to get ready to throw a tantrum about something and being kind of like PO'd about it. And Joe Greenhall being the first person to go, what are you going to do about it? And it being like, what? And kind of throwing you back into a place of like, this ain't it. Yeah. You can't sit here and be like, rah, rah, rah. And he was like, no, what are you going to do about it? And I was like, what? He's like, you're going to go home and you're going to work harder. You figure out what you did wrong and you're going to come back and you're going to do it better. And it was like, okay, yeah. And that's what would happen. And then, or it would be my mom, or it would be my dad, or it would be you, or whatever. It was like, it was somebody who sat there and said, okay, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
You're going to go home. You're going to figure out. You're going to work harder. But that opens this conversation too, to go, are they going home and figuring it out? Or are they waiting for the coach, instructor, trainer, parent, whoever to go, okay, tell me what to do. And then I'll do it. Because that is something that is also coming out of a lot of these kids of like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And you're like, but I don't want to be the one that wants this for you.
I don't need to be back there playing remote control. You're not a robot that I can go, A, and you go do this and do that, and I feel like there's a lot of that people think that the coaches should do, especially in kids in sparring and forms. It's like, tell me exactly what to do right now. Well, you kind of have to figure it out on your own. I'm not really coaching you to be a competitor. I'm just coaching you to be whatever I want you to be, which, that's great, but it's not, what does it really do? Like that doesn't help you get your goal. It doesn't help you be your own person, your own martial artist, your own competitir.
And that's the art side of martial arts.
Exactly.
Right? Which is being an artist, which is an individual.
Yes. It's huge. And that's part of the issue we see in creative forms now, and why we say there's so many replicas and everyone looks the same because of that.
So now I love what you guys are talking about are they coming back? What are they doing? Like Lauren, you gave the example when Joe checks you, like, what are you going to do about it? But there are some examples where the student does do that, unsolicited, and then over the years really surpasses the level. It does happen. Surpasses the level of their instructor.
That's the
point. That is the ultimate accomplishment, though.
I understand that. So now, no, I'm not. Don't look at me like I have two heads, right?
No, that
was happening before you made that comment.
Yeah.
All right. But then, now what? Now there has to be something has to happen, because we can't just keep going with this relationship, Yeah.
But I think this comes back to, oh my God, I don't remember what episode 7, at least.
You are a junkie.
7, where it was like, probably the biggest group of people who need coaches are adults.
Absolutely.
Because now all of a sudden it's like, well, you've surpassed your coach, and but now that you've got knowledge that the person who taught you, like, now it's like Casey said, the roles reverse. But as a coach that helped you get to this level, can I also bring you back to grounded, where I can shed perspective on it and go, but did you consider this?
Yes.
And you go, wait a second. And you're like, whoa. And you're like, hey, I've surpassed you, but are you still coming back to me to get guidance to go, hold on. Did you think of this?
It goes back to like building your team. You need outside perspectives, because like as an athlete, and it even goes back to the whole conversation where it's just like, athletes are really great athletes, but they might not be able to coach. You need that other person to help you with your progress. So even if that coach can't do it, they don't need to do it. Like it was like what Maureen says. It's like, are you guys wanting to be athletes, or am I going to be an athlete as a coach? No, you guys want to be the good athletes. So let's work on that. Like the coach is a good outsider perspective, and the coach, like, progression in their knowledge is very important, especially if they want to keep up with sport, because especially with strategy, it kind of like, it might surpass your knowledge. That was like something else Maureen said, where it's like, as a teacher, you can get your certificate and just stop learning there. But with coaching in sport, you need to kind of keep up with the pace of the sport, or the sport's going to outgrow you. So having that outsider perspective is really important. And the coach doesn't need to, like, it also doesn't need to be someone who was a really good athlete in the sport, who all of a sudden is the coach. I think there's actually very few, and I think like Trevor is one of the very rare examples where he's a good athlete, but also a very good coach. You don't have too many people like that.
Right.
So
I think sometimes too is, and I can speak from experience with Casey, is the relationship we started as athlete and coach that then became friends, that then became whatever you want to call this now, because it is something family. It expands beyond the sport of karate. It is all aspects of life, right? Like it is the ups, the downs, it's everything in between. It's the day-to-day, it's the laughter, it's the sadness, it's the mostly just anger, because that's the only emotion I really know how to show. It's all of these different things encompassing together, where you go, it has transcended sport and has become a life partner sort of thing, where you go, that's the ultimate, that, this isn't just something like where I'm like, hey man, can you tell me how to do a forward strike a little bit better? What do you think about this? It's like, hey, I'm talking about financial stuff, or we're talking about like work, like career progressions of stuff. And you go, that's really where all of a sudden I'm grounded again, because I can go back to this person who taught me how to do something really important 15, 20 years ago. It's just kind of crazy that we're coming up on what we're coming up in terms of time. And you go, and now we're talking about things that are so much bigger and better and beyond the sport of where we started. So I think it does transcend those things to go, hey, but this person knows me better than anybody. And she kind of keeps me grounded, or she helps me get into trouble. It's either or.
Yeah. Well, but I think if you go back to Alex's point, or I think your question was, what happens when the student surpasses the teacher? I think the role adjusts and it becomes more collaborative to where there's theory involved and there's methodology involved on how you're going to attack certain scenarios with someone that you've built a trusting relationship with that takes you now you're moving forward together. If I say that correctly.
Which is why like the coach athlete relationship is so important, the successful and effective relationship that you need, that it's progressing together. Sometimes that's more important than, having a good resume sometimes.
Yeah,
Not
you're
all the
right.
time, but sometimes.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you, Elise. Absolutely. But you, as a good instructor, you have to recognize that right away. You have to be able to recognize that, because if the student is the one to recognize that first, it's probably been that way for a while, right? So
Recognize what?
that student has already surpassed like the instructor.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, you have to be able to see that. Yeah.
And the instructor has to have a decent amount of humility, which not
The
all
student
instructors
also
do.
has to have some humility, because if the
you're right
student
on that one,
surpasses
too.
the instructor, and now the student looks at the coach, instructor, trainer, whatever their new title or previous title or whatever it was, and it's like, well, hey, I'm still trying to help you because maybe I see little things and nuances here, but you're like, yeah, I don't want to listen to what you have to say because I have owned the fact that I've surpassed you.
Right.
You go, that can be equally as detrimental, because now all of a sudden this could play into the next generation of stuff, because then the things that you're now not focused on because you don't think you need to be focused on them could be transpiring to whoever you're working with, So it is a constant, like, are you having that Joe Greenhall check you?
Right.
At whatever level you're at.
We all need Joe Greenhall to check us at one point.
Yes.
I worry
so
sometimes. That might be
He's checked me a couple times.
I'm gonna give us like 7 minutes. All right.
7
minutes to close.
Holy
this,
crap.
right? I know.
We could go for another 7.
We could go for another 70, but yeah.
Dude,
just
so
that
many
way we
bullet
kinda
points.
know where I know there's so many more points. I know. Where do we want to go next? As far as it's a topic we've talked about many times, and I think it does have to do with being able to help with coaching and their involvement of a competitor or whatever is the relative scoring. All right, so I think that's a good one to maybe end on. I know it has to do.
It's not going to happen in 7 minutes. No,
I know it's not. I know. And whatever. This will be the last one we focus on. But again, relative scoring to me is something that, I just think it's hindered the growth of our forms competitors so much. Some people have said that it's been great because it's helped the running of our tournaments, but it hasn't helped
at what
the
cost?
actual. Yeah, at what cost? It hasn't helped the development of the sport because, again, the score means nothing.
I have a question for the audience, because this is really my own personal, I would like to know. I mean, I have my own feelings, but would relative scoring be more effective if the person who won wasn't always given a 9?
All right, and before we answer that, let's explain what relative scoring is. So again, relative scoring is whoever you think was first place gets a 9.9. Whoever was second gets a 9.8. Whoever was third gets a 7. Whoever was fourth gets a 6. Most of the time after that, everybody else gets 5s, or maybe 4 get 5s and 4 get 4s or whatever. So they look at everybody kind of like how NASCAR does. So if you guys aren't, don't have the experience in that or don't understand what that is, they watch everyone and then they pretty much rank them. So the score is more of a ranking than an actual score. So
the positive I will say about it is that at least the judges get their first, whoever they thought was first, second, or third, those usually end up in the order that they rank them in. The problem is like we mentioned before, at what cost now? So now you always think you're a 9.8 or 9.98 because, you had someone if Casey and I were competing against each other. I'm not a 9.98. What in the world am I doing getting a 9.98? Just because I was the only other person there, I should be getting an 8.8, right? Come on.
Yeah. Well, and it actually hurts the top athlete too. The number one person doesn't really get any feedback and doesn't really get any constructive criticism. Like the score should actually show you, based on the score, you should know, all right, I need to improve on this, I need to improve on that. That's why the score should be broken down in, difficulty, whatever you want to do, entertainment, basics, lower body, whatever division it is, there has to be that. It has to be broken down, on into the 4 elements. This was something that we really did in the last few years of NBL. And I thought it was a great way to go forward with it. But again, it takes time to get people to understand it. And again, it takes time for the judges to understand it. So it takes more time on the tournament. So, but yeah.
Robin.
I think I agree with Alex. I think for the most part, it's helped us get the right kids in the right spot for the top 3. Which should be, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think that was the goal, was to make sure that you get the top 3 in the right order. And I personally think that they're doing a better job with that, which is helpful. I think from a measurable goal standpoint, it removes that for a lot of these kids. And I still have people that have come to the classes that have been competing for a while that don't understand relative scoring. They don't get why today I got all 8s. Mm-hmm. The next time my form was better and I got all 6s. Why?
Right. Mixed messages.
It's really mixed messages. Especially for your younger kids that can't process it.
Yes.
I think if it is conveyed properly, again, by the coaches to the athlete, they can maybe explain that in a better way that can help them be self-reflective. Right. Because I think that type of scoring puts the onus back on the coaches and the athlete to assess their progress comparatively.
Yeah.
Which is hard.
So I think this goes into an interesting thing, because when we were all kids, I feel like the most important investment that most of us made coming up through the ranks was the investment in a video camera. And now I know that phones are a thing now. So the phones are way more powerful than the 9,000-pound black and blue camera.
A lot lighter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I get that, but I think that goes to this idea of, and I've done it with one of the kids that I'm training with now, where their parent will actually go to a tournament, film everybody in the division, and won't tell me the results, and I'll watch each form and not care about what the actual scores were, and I'll go, this is how it should play out pretty close to this, and they'll tell me, and I go, then this is why it played out that way, because here's the things that now that you say, oh, like person 2 and person 3 were could have gone either way. You go, this is probably 1 or 2 of the judges was probably favorable to this over that. And you can start to break it down to go, but really the way to win this division is this. Like, this is what's missing in this category. Yeah. And that is such an important part of this relative scoring thing of like, you can't, which I hate because I heard it a lot today, you can't take this personal. You kind of just have to gauge it as what it is. I'm first. You go, okay, but how did everybody else do comparatively to you? And I think that was interesting because Casey and I were talking about it earlier today, where it was, why do we call it relative scoring? It's really comparative scoring. Mm-hmm. And I get it, that it's relative to everybody else in the division. Yeah. Right. It really is more comparative scoring of, well, when I compare you to everybody else in the division, here's how it plays out.
Yeah.
And
it's just a ranking system.
Yeah.
Right. Because the terminology was interchangeable. She's like, don't you mean this? And I was like, well, yeah, it's the same. We're talking about the same thing. We're just calling it something.
Yeah, and that was my thing, because I call it to my kids comparative scoring, that they're comparing. All they're doing is comparing you, and they're picking a winner.
Yeah.
Right. It just makes it really hard to know where to go with your training sometimes.
like as a coach, or
Yeah.
as a competitor.
And I think too,
Right.
your question to the audience was about the 9.99 scoring. I think from an audience perspective, that makes it confusing because so many other sports, I'm going to use gymnastics, use a similar scoring system, diving,
performance sports.
use that 10 is perfect. You got a perfect 10. So for us to also do it, but it not mean the same thing is
Yep.
confusing.
And super confusing to young kids.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Well,
yeah.
if you wanted to because this is a completely separate conversation
Yeah.
altogether, is if you wanted to mainstream this ever, you can't make it confusing to the general public. And that is aside from the fact that there really aren't any rules in our sport, it is the most confusing part about it. When you watch it, you're like, so a minute ago, the division with the girls, this happened and that one. And then 10 minutes later,
Right.
division with a bunch of boys that aren't adults. That guy's wearing some dressy looking thing. I don't understand what's happening. I don't get why that guy won when that girl did it.
Yeah.
These don't even look the same. Like the divisions from one to the next, the quality of athletes sometimes doesn't even look the same. And you're like, oh.
But that's where it's great. Like with your traditional leagues where it's the 2 head-to-head, choose.
Yeah.
2 head-to-head, choose.
Right.
It makes it a lot.
Unfortunately, they don't do it like that anymore.
No.
But yeah.
Made it
But
easier.
like
to
what
be
you
able
were
to-
saying,
But
Lauren,
they have an actual scoring system that works, I think, and it's better.
we
I mean,
Yeah, but there's still some confusion to that because I was watching the
there is.
Olympics and there were points where I was like,
Well, no, I know. Yeah.
But again, it's stuff that we all have to get used to and figure out how to navigate, right? Which is what you were saying about staying with the evolution of where your sport's going.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think for your common child athlete, I think it's really hard to measure if they're doing any better.
Yep.
It
Big
depends
time.
on the level. Too.
which
depends on the
I
level.
guess so. Then I guess it comes down to this conversation that I had with somebody over the weekend where you're like, because from a physiological standpoint, up until a certain age, there's really not that big of a difference. Is one way to kind of level the playing field is to put genders back together. Because once upon a time, that was the thing besides the scores that was pushing you is you're like, I have these people who physiologically, especially as a female, you're like, I physiologically will never be the same as the average male that is the same age, same height, and everything as I am. It's never going to happen. He's going to beat me every day. However, there are the exceptions. And the other thing is there's the intrinsic motivation of, but I want to beat them so bad that I will will this to happen as more than they will want it to happen for themselves. So you go, well, is that something that needs to happen? Do we need to look at the deconstruction of some of these divisions to put, quantitative talent back into a ring so that there is more of a challenge for some of these guys, girls,
Yeah,
etc.
but I don't think that addresses the concern with the relative scoring.
Well, no.
You're just now I should step back. Do I think that a female athlete benefits from comparing herself to all other athletes? Yes, I think we all do. I think that I would never have achieved what I feel I achieved if I hadn't been able to compete against the male competitors. I think for me, it made a huge difference. But I think if we're looking just at relative scoring, I don't think that that's going to help that scenario. I think it's a different type of conversation as far as goal setting goes and the height with which you can achieve perfection or greatness. I think when we separated the two, I think both genders adjusted the bar a little bit, maybe. I think the female side of it adjusted the bar more so, which is sad to see because I don't think we should limit ourselves to our competition. I think we shouldn't limit ourselves. We should push ourselves to our personal best in relationship to our potential, not other people's potential. Which goes back to what you said earlier about as an athlete, you need to be reflective.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we were talking about this kind of yesterday too, where it's like, gender, very polarizing thing.
It's a huge,
Yeah.
Whatever. But like in gymnastics, like you can see with the floor routines that, the way that the male system is ranked is because they can do some of the movement where with the females, they like Simone Biles is amazing because she's like just trying to push the barrier of that movement. And it's very high in difficulty. So that like, I think she was trying to do like double twist thing. Anyways, it was amazing. She's the only female that can do it because her like individual bodies are different, and her movement is privileged to that. So that's why like the difficulty level for genders are different, because but you should also be like Casey's saying, go to your strengths, right? Like, where are your strengths? How can I get better at this? And how can I like push the barriers of my sport in this way? The way that my body will allow me to do. Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
Which I think the only way to do that then is what you're saying, Jeff, is you have to have areas of concentration that the sport then focuses on to say, you're phenomenal as a performer.
Right.
Like 8-year-old Rudy Raynon, you're phenomenal as a performer, but when you fall out of a move and you get a 9,
right,
kind of complicates things a little bit. I mean, Ashley Lane did it a couple times, so did Jennifer when we were competing as kids. And you go, phenomenal performance, and you're going to win based on that. But there were some technical things you need to go back and look at.
Exactly.
Right. Like, and that now all of a sudden you have this thing where you're like, you know, hey, random insert name here, phenomenal performance. But the biggest thing I see from a lot of these athletes right now is not very good performance, not very good technical execution.
Right.
But it's movement.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's super creative movement, and I'm sure I can't do it. I'm like, I don't know how you did that. And sometimes I'm like, I know exactly how you did that. And sometimes I'm even more impressed. I'm like, that is the simplest thing, and you made that look so cool.
Right.
I can't believe nobody ever thought to do that, because that is so simple. It took us to now to figure that out. And I'm like, but so,
that's
I think
the way the sport should be going. It should be
right. And that's where, I mean, having
bringing those basics.
Yep.
Well, and that's where that score has to be, where you know, okay, you were great at this, but this is low because of that. And instead, they're winning, so they're just doing the same thing over and over.
I heard it too as a kid. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right. Yep. Right. All the time. Yeah. Why did you change this before? You know, I remember having the same conversation with Marcel. It's like, literally, we're at Atlanta. 2 weeks is U.S. Open. If I won, why am I going to do a different form of U.S. Open when this? You know, I don't know. I feel like all of us would be like, because, you know, like we're driving ourselves to be better, you know. But
my mom used to yell at me all the time.
Yeah.
Like
hey,
what?
me too.
Tell me.
Stop changing it.
Oh, stop changing it.
It's kind of exciting.
Yeah.
You wanted to do something different. You
it
wanted
makes
to
it more
better
fun.
yourself. You're like, look at this move's really cool, Mom. Check it out.
Yeah.
Well, I think too is
depends on your
and
goal.
I see it. You know what? I used to see it a lot when I would go up to Canada and train with Casey and Trevor, and that was feels like forever ago. But where you were always working on the next thing. Like if you were a blitzer and you knew it, you spent. And you hated it, but you did it. You spent a large part of your time not blitzing because you were like, okay, but what if we get into a position where we can't do that? Or in forms, it was, that's great, but what's the next evolution up for you? Are you working on it in March for July? Or are you just doing until you stop winning, or you stop winning as consistently, and then you're like, oh my God, I got to start.
I have to change something.
Right. And then what are you doing is you're just like, well, I'm copying it because this kid's winning and they're doing it, so I'm going to do what they're doing. Or whatever. Like, are you intrinsically looking at what it is that you need to be doing, or are you being motivated by extrinsic things that you're like, well, I have to do it because somebody else is doing it, and this is winning, and that's ultimately what I want, is I want the result. So I'm going to do what they're doing because it's working. And I think that's something that is a really interesting like shift of what we're saying. Is when we were kids, it was we already had that next form, but we didn't put it out there yet because we knew that it wasn't quite ready. You were like, I have the upgraded form. I may even have brand new music or whatever it is, but I'm not ready with it yet, because when I go out there, it's going to be like, holy cow. Which is much, he's not on here, but I know I've had many conversations with Calman, and he'll tell you to the day he dies, he goes, that Diamonds form where he double sorted it for the first time on stage, he goes, it was awful. And I'm like, how can you say that, man? And he goes, it wasn't, it was so unpolished. And I can say that about our sync form. First time we did it, with 2 weeks of working out, it was like,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we made it through, and that's kind of half the battle. So you were like, all right, well, we made it through, but
Yeah, but that's what makes Kalman such a unique athlete, right? Is he set his bar for himself here,
Correct.
and that's where the great
Yeah.
ones stand out, I think.
So
And
overall, I think so many people need to take a step back, and look at really, what your goals are, what you're accomplishing, what are you doing. There's so many things on this that we could go hours on.
Yeah.
We do need to wrap it up, unfortunately. But man, this has been great. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Casey.
we're
Thank
gonna put
you,
the
Elise.
podcast,
Yeah, put the
Elise's podcast link in
if
the
you guys
stuff.
haven't, check
Go
out
listen to all of them. I swear to God, there's not a single episode that's not awesome.
All
Like,
right, so
Casey's laughing at me, and she's like,
All right.
"God," I'm like, I legitimately spent 4 hours listening to all of them, and I was like, Jesus, I should have had a notepad. There's nuggets in all of them. Go listen.
Well, my
So,
favorite part about
yes.
what we talked about so far today was really the different relationship dynamic between the athlete, the instructor, the coach.
Yeah.
I think that was great. But
Great
actually,
stuff.
at least the way that you were bringing it up, like you have such a calming voice. Right?
Yeah,
The way
that was the
that
first
you
thing when
speak
I
to
listened
it,
to her podcast. Like,
wow, this is-
wow,
this
okay,
is-
all right.
It really
All right.
would just really calm me down. Like if you just said, Alex, you really just said anything to me and then put it in a positive light, I'd be like, oh yeah, of course I could do that. That's fantastic. But in reality, I'm more used to the way Lauren talks to me.
That's your
Constantly ready to beat people up. It's the Spanish in me. I
Just
apologize.
you and I, we're right here.
I'm like, look, I have one volume. It's too loud.
It's
All right,
that's
so
why I like it.
just so people know, Alicia's podcast is called Alicia's Point. Just so people know,
Yeah.
everyone just keeps getting. I'm gonna put the link. Guess what? Just look up Alicia's Point.
Yeah.
It's easy.
It's there.
There you go. It's there. So,
Awesome.
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you
She's,
guys
the,
so
she's the
much.
Canadian Delilah. Go listen.
Oh,
Thank you.
That's another way to put
wow. All right.
Oh,
Oh man, thank you
Thanks
guys
for
so much.
having us,
Thank you,
Jeff.
Virtual Fight Tour, for sponsoring us. All right,
it.
Alex.
This is going to be a great one. I can't wait to see what happens with Virtual Fight Tours card this weekend. We're gonna review that next week. This has been another episode.
Yeah.
What?
Oh, I'm saying after this, we have another group of amazing ladies that are coming. So we have a historical group coming in the next either week or 2 weeks. We're going to have Arlene, Elsa Cordero,
no.
Christine Rodriguez,
way.
and Helen Chung, all four together talking about
Ooh, the
history-
bangers.
talking about the history of females in sport martial arts. So, going to be awesome.
It's gonna be
All right,
something.
Alex, go, buddy. Now you're
This has
frozen.
been another episode of Inside Scoop with Alex and Jeff. I'm Alex Dingman.
I'm Jeff Doss. See you guys.